All right, Zig coming in on top. Today on the show, we have Robert Scheffler. Robert is a singer-songwriter based out of New York. Robert's musical journey is an interesting one and an inspiring one. It ebbed and flowed. He started in the scene, then he found himself doing a full-time gig for a magazine and found himself back in the scene. Robert's been described as a songwriter's writer and unquestionably one of the best performers in the New York area, as per local reviews. Robert has a new album out. It's called Truce. It's available June 26th on all streaming platforms. We're going to listen to a tune. This song is called Hang On Skyline. Hang On Skyline, Robert Scheffler, the artist. Truce, the album, available everywhere, June 26th on all the streaming platforms. Very cool. All right, friends. So I enjoyed this conversation with Robert, and I think you guys will as well. Before we get into it, if you hear anything you like, if you can like, rate, review, subscribe to the podcast and any of the podcast platforms, it helps me keep talking to cool guests like Robert and sharing their insight with you. And let's see, I'm a little self-promotion here. I play in a band called C Level, letter C dash level. We have a new tune out called Long-Legged Fly. It's available on all the streaming platforms. We recorded it with Pete Francis of the band Dispatch, so if you think this guy's banter is okay, you might dig his music as well. Anyway, here's my conversation with Robert. Dig it. Musically, were you playing and writing and everything before? Like, can you kind of start us off with this interview? Can you start like with a kind of tracing the beginning origins of your musical journey?
I suppose, yeah. So, growing up, there was music in the house. I was kind of lucky in that way that there was, my dad was a big audiophile, so he loved to he actually built, like stereo systems, but the upshot of that was he would blast music, and it wasn't my, kind of music, and then I had an older sister who was, Beatles, Rolling Stones. So I would copy, and just glom onto kind of what she was playing. And then pretty early on, I taught myself guitar, and pretty much I just started writing songs after that. I was ultimately I was influenced by like Neil Young, Jackson Brown, kind of the acoustic, guitar-based songwriters. And so I was just doing that for a while. And then in college, I had a group of friends in high school. We all played guitar, and so we would do some like coffee house kind of gigs. And I was gigging a little bit through college, and then I had a band out of college. And we did the circuit of bar band stuff, playing a lot of covers and then starting to write some originals. But as I was thinking of talking with you, I was just those are the years of the horror stories. So it's like you can imagine, I'm sure you can relate. Getting cheated and playing for the door, or just for passing a hat, and so that was kind of cut your teeth and that kind of stuff in band land. And so that one band would dissolve, and I'd hook up with another band, and eventually that all kind of and then I started working at a magazine, and so that sort of took over as the gigs got sort of plateaued, I would say. I just had this really great day job. I was freelancing, and that became a really excellent job, and I just loved it. So I sort of stayed with that for a long time. And then I left the job and got back to, I was just looking forward to getting back to writing and recording, and that's where this record came from.
Like it's interesting, like the kind of ebb and flow with that, because like at the very beginning of most of our musical journeys, I want to say like it's kind of it's wanting to do your own thing, and then you always find that way into like, okay, you have to like, oh, I'm playing this bar gig, and so I got to come up with 4 hours of stuff people already know, and this is just like, it's grueling. Like,
it's grueling.
And I got to imagine in New York it's even more grueling because there's a lot of people trying to get a lot of gigs.
There's a lot of people, yeah. And it's a different, like I grew up on Long Island, which is a suburb, kind of New York City suburb. And so that's where, our first bands were happening. And that's a very different thing. They definitely want cover they want the bars out there want cover bands, and there's only like one or two clubs that would ever, that would feature like touring acts that, at that time I really couldn't get gigs there. But so doing originals were kind of just for your friends and, a select crowd. And then when you cross over into the city proper, it's exactly the opposite. No, you cannot do cover songs, and everyone is expecting to see original bands, which is great, but there was definitely, at least for me, there was this journey that I had to, we had to come from the suburb into the city and be ready. And it's a different, you mentioned the competition, and it's a different competition in the city. It's just, which ups everyone's game, I think.
Yeah, I think ultimately, like, something like that definitely sharpens the knife, so to say, but also like it makes it harder to want to bring it to the table at first. Like, because I've played in New York in the city, and I've played in Long Island. I just did a gig there not too long around Thanksgiving, and it was in this. I think it was Cognac. I can't. It was really far out.
Comac, maybe.
Yeah, that sounds more right.
Does that sound right?
Yeah, and it was
that's out there.
Yeah, it was out there in like this a brewery. And like, it was a really cool spot, and like the people there were really receptive, and there was a lot of people there. But it was just like, it's a bar gig. So it was like, but
those are tough gigs. And did you ever do solo?
That was the gig, was by myself that time.
Oh, okay.
So
and those,
sorry.
Yeah. Go ahead.
I was just gonna say, like, most of the bar gigs I did, I wouldn't bring the band. Like, my experience with the band has always been like, they're in for the original, like, we're into this. So it's like trying to convince them to do like a wedding gig would be way harder than being like, hey, let's go play this underground like basement in in Alabama where a bunch of people are going to be there and be into hearing something new. You know what I mean? We won't make any money, but it'll be cool. Somehow that's an easier sell.
Okay. Yeah, it's those solo bar gigs where mostly what I was doing would be cover tunes. Those, I mean, you're lucky if you get a place where everyone's like sitting and listening, but those are tough, especially. And even in the city, when I started getting a little bit of traction in the club, there was a club called Chenet, which is long gone in the East Village. But Jeff Buckley sort of came out of there, if you remember him. So this club got a buzz around it, and it was extremely hard to get a booking there. But it was a coffee place that served drinks too, but no stage, really small. And luckily, I mean, the crowd was good there, but they would have this espresso machine because it was a coffee place. And if they make a lot of noise, like the steamed milk. So you'd have to suffer through. It was tough. It was that was a tough gig. But but yeah, those solo gigs are tough,
Yeah. So kind of like, it's really interesting at the beginning that like with the songwriters you were learning guitar from, like, it makes sense that songwriting would come naturally to that. Was there a point like with your own writing where you're like, I think I did something here. Like, I think I have a song I can play. Like,
yeah, I was, writing, starting out, I didn't really have stuff. I mean, I might play something for somebody, but nothing, I was pretty shy about it. And then when I had the band after college, we needed material, and everyone was into, transitioning from, or, mixing up covers and original songs. And so then this became this beast, if you're playing gigs, you have this need for material. And so that was a great sort of just fire, to to be writing, and then to have a venue to play something new out, and eventually if you get a regular crowd, people are going to want to hear something new. They don't, want to hear the same stuff. So then I became more comfortable with just, okay, here's a song, and some of them would be co-written, some of them were just me, and that I think for many years it was the idea of just, okay, we need content for the band, and hopefully it's people like it. And just over the years, and then when I went kind of solo with a band that was kind of based around me, it became much more important, and I became much more serious about writing. Not in a dour sense, but just in a career sense. I just was like, I can really invest in this material, and something that means something to me.
And what did getting more serious kind of look like as far as like on your own end? Was that like developing a writing routine? Was that like kind of analyzing writing in a different way?
Yeah, I think both. It was probably at the same time when I was coming into the New York City and facing stiffer competition and seeing really, other artists on the club circuit that were really impressive, and of course the other, the downside of being in the city is that, the industry is a big, it's on your mind, and it's people are, the good thing about it is, you're in clubs where people go, people work and live in the city and they go to clubs at night. And so it's good for meeting contacts, industry people. But that also is a level of pressure that is it can be, if you let it get to you, kind of anti-creative. So there's that. But yeah, it's just, I think it was making more time for it and taking it more seriously as a craft, and then listening to even the artists that you like and you've been listening to for years. I started listening with a different ear. I was like more analytic and tearing apart exactly why do I like this? What is it about this that is so special? And then then I would start paying attention maybe to Paul Simon, or somebody who really just can be dazzling with a lyric, as opposed to just somebody, this is a good rock song, just sort of tearing things apart a little bit and trying to get a piece of that for you, in the material I was doing.
Yeah. No, it's interesting. Like a lot of stuff we grew up liking and being influenced by, it's kind of one of those like, not a white noise in a way, but just a thing where it's like it just clicks and you're like, oh, this is awesome. And it's almost like diving into yourself a little bit to kind of tear apart like what makes this work. Okay, these lyrics are, this part is unbalanced, this bridge, and it really leads here. You just like little micro like kind of like a songwriter and analycities of tearing apart things you never thought about, but you just kind of felt. That it is an interesting point in which you do that. And it's also interesting too, where you're like, why do I like this? But it makes no sense. Like, when you develop a little bit of a frame for like some kind of song structures that you've already, like you've resonated with. I guess with that in mind, was there a particular kind of form that song structure wise that kind of appealed to you and kind of like became like a platform to build off of for your songwriting?
For me, it was, I'm a sucker for the regular kind of structure, verse, chorus, bridge, chorus, and, solo out. And I appreciate that, if you can make that sound, there's a reason that structure works, because it flow, it works. I think it works for listeners. And then, so writing, something kind of in a standard structure like that always appealed to me, because I feel like you're really digging into the craft. If you can, make that chorus deliver coming around a third time, and set it up that's great. And then, and then you want to mess with that, and then you want to break those rules, and then become appreciative of people who can do that and get away with it, So yeah, but I think I always kind of start off with a very standard verse chorus structure, and then try to mess it or break it, or if it works, it works. But I'm pretty much drawn to that kind of stock situation, which is, maybe to my detriment, but
I don't think
what are you going to do?
Right.
It's like,
well,
it's satisfying.
Yeah. I was going to say, like, it sets it up so it's but it's not necessarily easy just to make that work.
It's not easy.
You know what I'm saying? Like, it's a hard.
It is not easy. Yeah. It's so true. It's it's an old saw, but it's that the very simple things can be tough to spit out.
With going back to, like, who was kind of on the scene when you were going, like, embracing yourself and kind of like doing the solo aspect, like, who are some of the other, like, songwriters you found yourself sharing bills with?
Well, it was a lot of people. I don't know that anyone would know them, but a lot of times I would be, if I was connecting with like a producer or something, and they would take me to see the hot guy who's like pulling huge crowds in clubs. I never heard of these people after a while, and I think in the city too, and maybe it was, just I was in different circles, but sometimes a band would come out of the city and I never saw them, I never heard them, I never crossed their path. But, like this band would come out of the city and I was like, oh, these guys are great, and how did I not even know this, but that would happen a lot. There's a guy named David Poe who was, he was the sound guy at CB's Gallery for a while. And he was we had some musician friends in common, and I know he got a record deal after a while, and was a really, really good songwriter. And a guy named Peter Stewart also, and I'm trying to think. I can't. No one else really comes to mind. It might have happened, but there were definitely some people who I would see. If I would do a festival in Boston or something, or I would see people from the city. But yeah, it was there's a lot of people on the bill. As you probably know, you could do a Tuesday night and you're on at 10 o'clock and you're one of 5 acts, and it's there's a lot of people here, or there were. I don't know if
well, I got it seems like it just is such a different type of market because there is so much there and so much going on in the city. You know what I mean? Like, and I gotta imagine it's really hard to, unless it makes sense that certain people would just pop up and just be here, like, oh, they're from here, and they're like, yeah, they're like, just there's so many, like, even just like with the small venues, the DIY spots, they're there, then they're gone.
Yeah.
Or not even DIY, but I mean like small venues that are there and gone. Like, from my experience playing in the city throughout the years, like, you'll know one spot and a guy who books there, and no, that's not there anymore, especially post-pandemic. But like, but yeah, so it makes sense, like, being in it, like you were and are, like, you would see these like artists kind of like appear then disappear. Like, I'd imagine it's much more of an ebb and tide in that sense. Like,
yeah.
So okay, so you're taking writing more seriously. You're getting more of this, and now the band, and you develop a band that's based around you, right?
Yeah.
Okay, and like, and is this post college or pre college?
This is a long post college.
Okay.
And yeah, I put this band. It took. Had a couple of friends from Long Island. We played together, and then everyone kind of migrated to the city, and I made a band called A Million Pieces, and that's what I was doing in the city for a long time.
Okay. And like, so on a side note, before getting, did you go to college for music, or did you go to college?
No.
Oh, okay. What'd you go to college for?
Oh God, it was a long, sad story, but I was really good at math, and then so I went to school for math a little while, and then I transferred to a tougher school, and the math was not working out, so I switched to psychology, and then eventually I got into social work a little bit too, actually. So no music, and I was kicking myself honestly for a while because I always wanted to study music, but I just, I had this thing in my head. It wasn't financially, it just wasn't a practical thing to do. And it was foolish, on my end, but, I let all those voices, come in that just would say, no, do something you can get a fallback, do that's what you should study. But what are you going to do? But I did take some, I squeezed in some music classes, and I would haunt the piano rehearsal rooms rather, at night, and get yelled at by the serious music majors. Like, what are you doing here? Fuck you playing Neil Young on a piano. It's like I have to, I'm doing Beethoven. But so I just snuck it in, but didn't study it.
It's interesting because like the academic route musically is very like I think it's like an A and B path. It's still going through the same channel, you know what I mean? But it's a very different kind of outlet and like journey compared to like the do it on your own, like the bar route, you know what I mean? The playing, the gigging route in that sense. And like, I don't think one's better than the other, I kind of started in the, like, I didn't study music myself, like in high school or anything, but in college I did. And like, but at the same time I was already kind of doing bars and mic nights and stuff as a kid, you know what I mean? Like, so it was like that route, like, it's interesting, like the, just the kind of parallels you see in that. But it makes sense, to kind of.
What's your instrument? Your main instrument?
Sing and play guitar.
Yeah. Did you find, like, I found the people who straddled that line of more formal music education were keyboard players, because that's I felt like that's I guess people can self-teach, but if I knew anyone who was kind of a serious student of music and also doing bar gigs, it was usually someone on a keyboard.
Yeah, keys. I think like it's just like when you play guitar, it's more of a feel, more of like the sheet music. The guitar is weird because you can find a spot where your C fits, but it also fits in a bunch of different spots too. Where on the piano, it's like very clear which C we're playing. This one's in the middle. Boom. Yeah, there's a starting point. Like, where's the middle of the guitar? I don't know, man. Like, depends the key. What key?
It's somewhere there, but who cares? Yeah.
And like, and just like kind of the nature of like the history, I think, of like music that is presented as good piano playing comes from kind of like a trained background, where like the history of good guitar music comes from like Jimi Hendrix. You know what I mean? Like it's already kind of a celebrated feel type of instrument.
Yeah, and I'm thinking as you're talking just of like the folky background too. It's just people can sit on a porch in Tennessee and play on a guitar, but pianos are just a little different. They probably have a more of a formal background, in classical. But yeah.
And I don't know. My experience with it was even like it's easier to read and play it. It's just like it kind of goes naturally together. But but okay, cool. Okay, so like now bouncing back to when you're kind of doing the missing pieces, and you guys are playing.
Million Pieces.
Yeah.
Missing, that's a better name.
I don't know. That's me missing pieces right there.
Man, I wish I thought of that.
But like, now what I find it interesting that you get like a writing gig for a magazine. So like,
Yeah.
you're already kind of taking writing more serious as a musician. Is it like, are you doing other sorts of like writing that kind of lead to that type of gig? And like,
Yeah, what led to that type of gig was a completely fortuitous. I was looking for work, and my friend Mark Warren, who was a good friend of my partner's from Texas, he worked at Esquire magazine. He worked at the magazine, and I started out as a fact checker, and so I didn't write till much later, and not a whole lot. But my main gig was doing like the research that went into, checking facts and providing sometimes, research to writers who needed some info. But it was a lot of checking of facts, which was just a great job. And I didn't kind of even know, I didn't even think about it. But Mark was able to sort of introduce me, and that was just a great thing. I was looking for a flexible freelance gig, and that's how it started out. And I just, I just loved it. So I just got into it. And I wrote mostly humor pieces, which were a lot of fun. It was a great the staff, the editorial staff at the magazine were really cool people, and were super open to everyone contributing anything that was good. And so I could pitch these silly ideas, and they would print them. So it was great.
did I guess like from writing in that sense, did you find a crossover with songwriting and kind of like?
Absolutely.
Yeah. And what's that? Yeah. What were those through lines?
The through line at the, starting out, just working at a publication, and you're reading, you're just reading all the time. You're reading a lot. And so that, and then if you're lucky, you're reading well-written pieces, which I was lucky enough to, do. It was a great magazine. And so you're reading, and then you're talking and dealing with writers who, take it pretty seriously, and they're good. And so that just gave me, it kind of just, it increased my interest in reading outside of work. And so just the more I read, the more I felt like I had a little more flexibility and craft. It just, you sort of pay attention to style of words, of sentences, and how a paragraph can flow. And so I just I became aware and appreciative of writing. And so when I found out to do a lyric, it just helped out a great deal.
So, like in the sense of like kind of conceit, like maybe like finding a concise way to say certain things from studying craft, or line length or flow of like how to turn a phrase. Does that make sense?
Yeah. It was, I think, a little bit of all that, turn a phrase and kind of be a little more fearless about something that, take a chance on a rhyme that is unexpected. And I think, and realize that a single word can have a powerful impact. And that I think I was more tougher on myself too, that if there was a line or two of a lyric that seemed weak, I wouldn't, whereas, years ago I might have let it go, but I would kind of stick with it more, because I kind of knew it could be better, and it was worth it to work on it. So there was stuff like that, just taking it all more serious. Yeah, I mean, serious is maybe not the right word. It's just being more invested, perhaps, in that whole process, because I was surrounded by people who took it, who were invested. It was great. I really loved it.
I also got to imagine kind of being around people who are more aware and invested in like tuning the craft, like also kind of made it a little more clear of how to tune the craft.
Yeah. Yep.
Was there any particular writers or like, I guess when you were doing the research part of it, like, or just people you worked with that whose influence definitely like helped you with songwriting that you could maybe even trace?
Yeah, it wasn't so much as a single. I mean, the whole atmosphere of being there was just great for my music, because I met a whole new group of people who were super cool and would go out and would go out and see me, and that was great. There would be we would have record reviews at that time, so there was like music sort of coming through to be written about. And just as a side note too, we called it the slush pile, but I don't know if that's a common phrase. It was just, like PR people would send in at that time CDs, just to hopefully get a review or to get it in front of somebody. And so, but they would be, it would never happen, so there was this stack area of books and CDs that were just on their way to being discarded, really, because there was just such a volume of this stuff coming in. But for someone like me, I could sit and go through through these things and pick out CDs and go out on a limb with somebody you never heard of, and listen to a record. And that was another great thing about being there.
The slush pile.
The slush pile. Yeah.
Well, sorry.
No, I actually, and occasionally I would meet or get to talk to a musician who would say to me, "Oh, how'd you stumble across my stuff?" And I was like, I could not tell them they were on the slush pile, but it was like, but you were on the slush pile. But lucky for me.
Was it? Do you remember any of the cats you interviewed from the slush pile?
Yes, but I wouldn't want to say, because that would okay.
That
would out
the pile.
yeah, because I wouldn't have told them at the time. So, yeah.
So another part I found interesting when getting ready to talk with you, one of the endeavors you guys went on for an article was one with Warren Zevon.
Yeah.
So can you describe that experience?
So this a preview of the record came through, and I was a big fan of Warren Zevon, and I was going to pitch an article about this record. So I went to this release. It was kind of a party, but it was really scaled down. So this thing was in a studio downtown. I forget what studio, but Zevon was there, and some of his people were there, I guess from the record label. And they played some tracks, and then he talked about it. And it was this idea where he did a lot of the stuff at home, and then came in to the studio to, I'm not exactly sure, probably add some tracks or, probably mix it or something. But it was this idea of he just did a lot of it on his own at home, and then finished it up. And so I thought I had a good story. I thought it's like, this is cool, but yeah, I couldn't really sell it. I couldn't sell the pitch to anybody. And but it always stuck with me. I kept the CD, the promotional CD, and I don't know if you know the record, but it's a great record.
Oh yeah, that's why I like part when I keep running in. He's one of the songwriters, and like anyone,
Yes.
you know what I mean. And like, so there's always like this, especially about that record. It strikes such a chord, and like I think it was with everything he was going through at that time, and like the kind of like positive like attitude he had about it, and like the beauty that came from it.
Mm-hmm.
And like, so just being able to kind of catch a glimpse of that had to be pretty awesome.
Yeah. It was, I was shocked that it was such a small affair, this, record release event, and that I couldn't really make it into an article. Because I thought it was exciting, and I thought it was really interesting. But yeah, that's just how that happened. But yeah, I was lucky to just be in the same room with him.
Did you so like I guess taking away that kind of like you can kind of do this on your own at a home, and then like the kind of process of that, you know what I mean? Which I think it's pretty common now, but you know what I mean? Like when studios were set up different and not everyone had a microphone and a laptop, you know what I mean? It was a much more difficult feat. But
Absolutely.
For your own writing and your own song recording process, did that change it? Did that make it more accessible for you?
Yeah, like when I was starting out this record, I just thought, okay, let me, just do some demos at home. And then as I kept working on it, and, I didn't have the access to a band who's, I can take things to, I just really, and as you said, the software and the shit you can do on a laptop just, is crazy. So I just kept working on it, and I was like, "Oh, let me replace all these, these scratch tracks, these demo tracks, with a better track." And then, and as things like years ago, probably when I first got some home studio stuff, the sound of things was not. It's improved greatly, maybe except for horns. I don't know. Horns are kind of an issue probably. Yeah, right. So,
yeah.
But, there was so much that I could add a track that I was like, oh, this is pretty good. This sounds good. And I did appreciate the luxury of that you can take at home. You can just, cut and paste a track and really, do a nice compilation version of things. And so I just kept working on it that way. But, I did start out with sort of the idea of doing demos, but, literally I did, I was looking up, so that Zevon thing, I was like, oh, this, let me work on this. And, so I did, for better or worse, it is a trade-off. I did miss the excitement of being in a studio with friends, and playing together. So, yeah.
Yeah, there's like a aside from just like the kind of shenanigan fun factor of like the studio, there's also like that kind of like peer pressure, like, okay, I can do it better, roll it again, you know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
Or
up to a point.
yeah. True. And then I've learned, like, for me personally, it's like, okay, I work with one guy when we're doing the vocals because I know he'll put up with my like 30 takes. And, I don't invite the band to that one because they would be like, what's wrong with it? You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's fine. It's fine. Yeah, it goes both ways for sure. But there's kind of nothing like being, in the studio for me. It sounds like you too. It's just it's an exciting place to be.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Well, it's like one of those things like we're doing something. We can make this happen. You know what I mean? There's like a creative enthusiasm just to the room when all the lights being on and like all the faders being zeroed. Like, so with now, was this a similar process with the other two records before for Truce?
No.
Okay.
Totally different. Where I had a band. Well, actually, my first thing was an EP called Needles, which I went into a studio, but did a lot of tracks myself, but in a studio. And that was just, it was kind of my first effort at recording as a solo person. And then for the other two records, I had this. It was the band A Million Pieces, and then John Abbey and Phil Cimino, and just great musicians. And John was also engineering at the time, and kind of putting a studio together. So he would pull in musicians, and it was great, but yeah, definitely a different feel, because when I listened to those records, I'm so appreciative of what everyone added to it. It was just like stuff I never would have thought of on my own. And it just really filled it out in a great way. So it's a different kind of thing, and I've yet to play like this new record. So I've done, tunes out solo, but I've never played them out with the band. So I'm curious, how that would work and how things would change.
Do you have is there a plan to?
There's not that I can come up with, but right now it's just, I'm not yet, but, no, I'm just kind of doing some solos, and I'm just continuing to write. So I'll see what'll happen.
Because like listening through, like I wonder if it differs from the demo to the finished product. Like "Hang On Skyline," there's this really cool, it's like a rhythm lead section going on the guitar, and like it's like these what's the country term for it? When you play small intervals, and it highlights the chords that like of the song in a really interesting way. So is that you, or is that like in the studio? Like I'd wonder if that was on the demo.
It wasn't. So that's something, it's funny that you mentioned that, because that's a song that when I brought it to the studio to mix and kind of finish up, it just wasn't working. The demo version was not working. And so I kind of went back to the drawing board and deconstructed like the first half of the song, which had started off like full band. And it's, for some reason that sounded okay to me at home. But then when we got to the studio, it's like, oh, this, it starts off on 10 and has nowhere to go. And then, so we pulled it apart, and it just kind of, that was a redo. So that was not on the demo.
Okay. That's cool. I like double stops to where I'm looking for. It's like these little double stops, which are like these but I think it really brings out and helps make that loft into the big cell on the last chorus, But like,
great. I'm so glad to hear that.
It's little stuff like that sometimes you don't think of until you have to like recontextualize everything. Like,
yes.
And it's interesting, too, the musicality that kind of affects kind of like, you can have a well-written song, like, as is, just like by itself. But when you lay it out in like the texture of a band's setting, like that well-written song it has some edits it has to have. And it's interesting, you know what I mean? Like having the one square there or the form there, and like the little details that you would never have thought of, because until that part of the process, I guess is what I'm saying.
Yeah. Yes. And sometimes I think in hindsight, it's that the song is not being allowed to be itself, like I was imposing, which might have been a good idea at one time, just the idea of what the song should be. And then, you write the song and finish it. And then it's just not it's not being its best self somehow, so you go back and redo.
Was there any other tunes that like kind of ran into that same rut with this batch? A rut. Let me see.
Some of them, I'm looking at the track list here. Some of them came together pretty easily. In terms of what took a little longer, that was clearly the one that got rewritten the most. I think "Where Do I Know You From," which for me is a little attempt at some funk, took a while. It was a little bit of a stretch for me in terms of the beat, and there's a kind of a bridge that is spoken, and little bit humorous, I hope. So that sort of getting that to sit right, just took a while in the mix, and so that did take a while. I think yes, and maybe Punchline. I think the second to last track, because it's a rock, because it's a big band rock song. I think initially we just had to pull out some denseness, to make that flow a little better. But yeah, I think that's about it. Hopefully some of the other tunes were just, tweaks along the way, but we're pretty, by the time I got to the end of the writing process was more or less what we wound up with, in the finished versions, just a little more polished.
Because like what I find really interesting with this record, it kind of toes the line of like songwriter and like heavy rock. I hear some things, I'm like, oh, that sounds like a Foo Fighters influence. But you know what I mean? Where sometimes like songwriter rock kind of like you get like the Bruce Springsteen kind of like feel to it. You know what I mean? And like what I think really makes these songs strong and stand out is that they have that like that other rock element to it, but the songwriting is still there, and like it's not buried. It's only kind of heightened by the like emotional intensity of the rock background of it.
Thank you. I'm glad to hear that, because I just never was one or the other. I love playing acoustic and I love playing electric guitar, and I've always done both, and I just never. Sometimes I feel like, there are some great artists that kind of stick to one lane or the other, and I love that. But I just, after a couple of acoustic tunes, I just, there's just no way I'm not going to pick up the Strat and just want to do something in that vein, So it makes it tough. Like you might have faced this too. Like if you, sometimes if you're submitting material, or, I used to do some song contests in the past. You always have to they always want you to categorize everything,
Yeah.
Are you rock or acoustic, and then I think, like, what's Warren Zevon? What category is he in? Is he rock? Is he acoustic? There's just I hated that. You just, and so often you can't even hybrid. You just have to choose a category. So yeah, I resist. Damn it, I resist those categories. But there's it's just too much fun to play both kind of guitars, So
definitely agree with that, and like it's great. I mean, I guess maybe on like the other end of the editorial like side and writing and publishing side, you can see the benefit of knowing okay, this is an acoustic guy who does an acoustic thing at acoustic times. Like, I get it. I don't have to do too much. I know what I'm looking at. But right. Like on the other end of it, it's like, oh man, there's like how you're saying, what's Warren Zevon? Like, there's so many of these things that like it makes it so hard to say, this is the thing I do for sure. And like, I don't know.
And nothing else.
And nothing else. Like,
yeah.
So what, I mean, aside from it being a really well written and beautiful tune, what made Truths the title track?
Oh, that's a great question. It probably was in the running for a title. What pushed it over the edge for me was just thinking about what I thought of as the truth that's that I'm singing about is this idea of kind of having maybe the world kind of treat you well if you are putting good things out into the world, and how that it's an expectation, but it doesn't work out. I like that a lot. And then when I thought more about it, I saw that kind of theme in some of the other tracks, and I thought, okay, that makes more sense. And because it's this expectation of how you get along, in the world, even if it's unspoken and like in a relationship or just going through life, you hope for a good deal, and if it works out, it doesn't. But so I felt like that was a bit of a theme. So that kind of made it into the title category.
I mean, it's definitely a heady concept, and like it's one of those things. The more you examine that concept in different aspects of life, more of those the idea of like, well, which truths did I accept here? It becomes more clear. Yeah. And I can definitely listening to that and like reading it as a title, I was like, okay, that's cool. Like, it's one that makes you think, and like, but yeah, and just like on multiple levels, especially as I'm doing something creative, there's a lot of truths. Like
a lot of truths. Yeah,
you find yourself making.
Yeah, and when I my friend from the magazine Rockwell, who did the cover, any doubt I had about the title, either being one word, or just not descriptive enough or something like that, when he just presented me with some cover ideas, and I was just like, that's it, we're done. I felt like he just did this beautiful image, and it was just perfect. So that was a good sort of cap on the squeamishness I might have felt at the title.
It does sum it up pretty well.
Yeah, right.
Robert, thank you so much for taking time to chat with me, man. I enjoyed getting to dive into your career and your music. Before we wrap up, is there anything else that you got going on? Like you said, you're back to writing, so I'm guessing album 4 is in the works or on the wax.
Hopefully, yeah, it's there somewhere. I mean, I got a handful of tunes, and right now I'm having fun writing, so I'm going to keep doing that, and just probably venture out to a couple of solo gigs, and then take it from there. But so I don't know. It's undecided after that. But Dave, it was so much fun to talk to you. I really appreciate it, and thanks a lot.
You got it, man.
Yo, Spike Spiegel here. You just listened to Zig At The Gig podcast. Keep riding the bebop. See you, Space Cowboy. Bang.